For those that might not remember, or those who are simply too young to, handheld gaming was a big deal in the mid-2000s. There was the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, and most importantly for today's video, the PlayStation Portable. And before the release of the PSP in Japan, FromSoftware was approached by Sony and given an offer to make a launch title for the new system. And interestingly for us today, FromSoft decided to take that offer, giving us Armored Core Formula Front. So how did the first and only Armored Core game developed exclusively for handheld work, and was it any good? Well, let's talk about it. And before getting too far into the video, I should mention that this is the 10th in a series of videos where I'm playing every Armored Core game for the first time and reviewing them as I go along. And while you don't have to have seen the other videos in order to enjoy this one, you'll be missing a lot of context about my personal journey with the games if you haven't seen them, so I'll have the full playlist linked in the description below for those of you that want to check those out first. But with that out of the way, Armored Core Formula Front is a mecha video game developed by FromSoftware and released in 2004 for the PlayStation Portable. And much like Ninebreaker before it, Formula Front is a game that is also completely focused on the arena. But it's a very different game from any in the series to come before it, so we have to spend a little bit talking about the basics here. In Formula Front, the player can only fight in the arena using something called a UAC, or an unmanned armored core. And the way that this works in the gameplay is that you don't actually control your AC at all. Instead, you build your AC like you normally would, but you also have to go in to customize and tune the AI of your AC to behave exactly how you want it to. The AI will then control your AC during the arena matches and fight for you fully automatically. The game also provides you with every single AC part from the beginning just to ensure that you have everything you could possibly need to work with. And at first, I thought that all of this sounded really not fun, but I found myself pleasantly surprised. While normally I think that earning AC parts is a core part of the progression of these games, the nature of this game means that not only do I find it necessary here, but I was actually thankful to have this level of freedom from the very start to help me with figuring everything out and kind of easing into this new formula. And when it came to the AI tuning, I actually had a blast with it. At first, it seems really overwhelming, but bit by bit, you start to piece together how this system works, and it's really satisfying once it starts to all come together. So to break it all down, the AI is split into 3 parts. The first is called the base character, and this is where you essentially tell your AC how to behave. You set what range you want your AC to engage at, how aggressive or defensive you want it to be, how often you want it to use its boosters or jump around, that sort of thing. Then there's the performance page, which allows you to slot in points to determine what your AI's strengths and weaknesses will be when it comes to things like navigation, proficiency with weapons, how effective they are at attacking or defending, etc. And finally, there's the operation chips, which are pretty much like commands for your AI. These will activate at certain times in the match depending on how you set them up, and allow you to make your AI do things like bunny hop around, rush straight towards the enemy, discard their weapons and swap to others, that sort of thing. But the downside to the chip system is that they only work on these timers. So for example, if I want my AC to bunny hop, I have to tell it to start bunny hopping at say 30 seconds into the match or 60 seconds into the match, you get the idea. And personally, I think this system is mostly best ignored since you can never really accurately predict what will be happening at like the 30-second mark of your match. But I think that this could have been handled a lot better with one simple change. I personally would have made the chip system more like a deck of cards where you can select like 3 to 5 chips for your AC to have during a match, and they all load into the match with you. Then, while you're sitting there watching your AC fight and watching the match play out, the player could manually activate any of these chips as they felt it was best to. So for example, there is a chip in the game that forces your AI to focus mostly on dodging missiles and prioritize that over everything else. So you'd be able to see your opponent start launching missiles, and rather than just hoping that you get the timing right when you're setting it up beforehand, you could actively tell your AC to start dodging them once that happens. While this might give a little too much manual control to the players, which obviously wasn't what FromSoft was going for, I think something like this would have made the system infinitely better because as it is currently, like I said before, it's pretty much best left ignored because most of the time, those are not going to be the ideal things for your AC to do at random points in the match. And in general, the AI tuning stuff made me wonder if this system, or something very similar to it, is the one that FromSoft has been using for enemy ACs throughout the entire series. I mean, ever since Generation 1, enemy ACs have all had distinct behaviors in combat, and honestly, this system might at least be incredibly close to how they've achieved that throughout the years, because once you play around with it enough, you start to see how those behaviors might have been used in previous games. Overall, I really didn't think I would like the AI stuff, but I genuinely did. It was a completely new type of challenge for me to take on as an AC fan, and in all honesty, tweaking my AC's AI after every match just to get that little bit closer to perfection was incredibly satisfying and something that I'm really not a skilled enough writer to do justice to. Now, some more seasoned Armored Core fans might be waiting for me to talk about manually controlling the ACs. And I haven't brought it up yet because while it is something that you can do, it wasn't part of the original release of the game. See, the original release of the game in Japan only featured the AI-controlled ACs, and the Western release that came out about a year later, titled Armored Core Formula Front Extreme Battle, was the first version to allow players to manually control their ACs. And while I played that exact version for this video because I don't speak Japanese, I refrained from manually controlling my AC at any point in the game because I wanted to play and review Formula Front as it was designed and originally made to be played. And if you thought I was done talking about the AC designing in this game, you're wrong. Something interesting about Formula Front is that you don't play as a pilot, rather you play as an architect for an entire team of ACs. So you have 5 AC slots in your garage to customize, and all of them can be used for battles. The catch here is that your different ACs can't share parts. So for example, if you use a certain weapon, frame part, or internal part on your first AC, you can't use it for any of the other 4 after that. And at first, I thought that this 5-man team thing was an awesome idea because I thought that the battles would involve you and the other team both fighting each other with 1 AC at a time, and the first to clear the other team's entire roster would be the one to win. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Every enemy team in the game that you fight only has 1 AC, and you just get to choose which of your 5 will actually fight in the match with them. Honestly, I think a system like the one that I initially imagined would have been a lot more interesting, just because it would add a lot more intrigue to that 1 AC per part system in terms of the overall gameplay. As it is, it's a kind of neat system, but it doesn't really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things. And while I did end up making 5 different ACs to humor FromSoft, I honestly feel like in the state that the game released in, you're better off only just having 1 or 2 ACs that you can use whatever parts you want for. Getting more into the actual structure of the game, the story here is incredibly simple, but it's enjoyable for what it is. The news stories from Nexus have made a return, but here they only exist to report on the various matches, rivalries, and other happenings of the Formula Front League, the particular league of the arena that we fight in throughout the entire game. And this game is definitely where FromSoftware has leaned the most heavily into the arena being ACs fighting for entertainment and sport. During every match throughout the game, there's bright lights, upbeat music, a crowd cheering, and these crazy action cams trying to make everything more entertaining to watch for the folks at home. And even though it's completely different tonally from everything else in the franchise, it's really charming, and since this game isn't canon to the overall story of Armored Core, there's no reason to complain about how different and out of place it all feels. And remember when I said in my last video that I wished FromSoftware would return to having players just climb the ranks by defeating every single opponent to get there? Well, to my very pleasant surprise, they did exactly that with Formula Front. And a cool addition to this system is that the lower ranked opponents can actually challenge you to a rematch. And in the case that you do get challenged for a rematch, you're required to fight them a second time before progressing further in the ranks. And honestly, I had never thought about this before, but every time we climb the ranks of the arena in these games, we're constantly challenging those in the rank above us to earn their spot, but no other competitors are allowed to challenge us for our spot. So I actually thought that this was a really awesome change, and it just kind of lends to the believability of the whole thing. My only disappointment with this addition is that when you are fighting a rematch, if you lose, you don't go back down a rank, you just have to keep trying over and over again until you defeat them like normal. I love the idea here, but I think they need to take it just that one little step further in order to really nail this change. And there's a surprising amount of map variety in Formula Front as well, between the new maps, those of them that are reused from games like AC3 or Nexus, and even some repurposed areas from missions of games like Silent Line, or even some of the Ninebreaker training exercises. And I don't have much to say about the actual quality of the maps in terms of gameplay since I never manually controlled my AC, but visually they looked nice enough for a handheld game from the mid-2000s. Most of them are visually distinct from one another, and I think they get the job done pretty well. And while I don't have much of a personal story to tell you guys about climbing through the ranks, I did really like having the news system back and keeping track of some of the top rankers in the arena. Throughout your entire time in the game, you'll be reading all these news reports as if you're just reading about your favorite sports teams in real life, and it really felt like FromSoft was building up their legend throughout the game before having you finally face off against them later on. And knowing which teams had rivalries between one another and why they did lent a lot of personality to them, and I would even go as far to say that the teams in Formula Front have more personality than any other arena pilots ever have in the franchise. And the return of the mail system, which was weirdly absent from Nexus and Ninebreaker, also means the return of other competitors emailing you just to talk shit and tell you how little of a chance you stand against them. So by the time that I finally made it up to challenging the top rank, I had a very good understanding of the team I was up against and had even exchanged some choice words with their lead AC architect. And there were even reports in the news near the end of the game about how Team Chole, the rookie team who had been climbing the ranks at blistering speeds, was about to face off against Arty, the team with over 50 wins in a row in the #1 spot, and how that match had already sold over 200,000 tickets in pre-sales alone. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about adding some nice charm and personality here, because all of that buildup made it even more satisfying when my AC defeated theirs on the first try, making me the new best architect in the league. So overall, I found myself surprisingly pleased with Formula Front. I had gone in expecting a janky handheld game, and while that's kind of what I got, I enjoyed it a lot more than I had expected I would, and the fact that it only took me about 5 hours to clear the entire thing made it even better, since the game didn't overstay its welcome at all. Right as I was getting to that point where I had kind of had my fun and I was ready to move on, I was already done with the game, and there's definitely something to be said for that. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give Armored Core Formula Front a 6.6. But what do you guys think? Those of you that have played the game, those of you learning about it for the first time through this video, let me know in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to go ahead and leave a like, a comment, a subscription, anything to let me and the algorithm know that you did enjoy. It helps me out a lot, so I'd really appreciate it. And I try not to bring it up too much, but if you've enjoyed these videos and you have a stable enough income to do so, I would really appreciate it if you considered becoming a channel member. It starts as low as $2 a month, and it goes a long way in providing me a more stable income and allowing me to put more time into projects like this one. And hey, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't seen them already, then you definitely enjoy the rest of my Armored Core videos, so I'll have those linked right here on screen.